So today we have our first, what I would call, more useful application that we're building. Um, Essentially, what's going on is we have a company called ThreadShed. They have a very old point of sale system that saves data in a really weird way. And if we take a look here, this is what the data looks like. It's a huge string of numbers and values and colors and names that are separated by this delimiter. And remember, delimiters are just things that are separators, right? Um, Colon, comma, colon, okay? And then each transaction is separated by just a comma by itself. So we have this really huge, funky looking thing that we're going to have to clean. And so, oddly enough, the first job that I interviewed for while I was still in IC Stars, um, they wanted me to clean uh, a huge spreadsheet of data. And I failed. I cleaned the data using um, Excel spread, like the actual Microsoft Office Excel spreadsheet stuff, and I didn't use enough code. Um, had I known about this type of technique before, I probably would have been okay. But I didn't. I didn't. I had no idea. So oftentimes you're going to get lists of things that you need to organize into usable, valuable data, right? So there's valuable data inside of here. We just have to get to the valuable data. So this is probably the most complex and difficult task that we've done to date. And when we're done with this, what you should really do to turn it into a true application is to functionize a majority of what we're doing. We're going to create a couple functions just because we're doing repeated activities. But this would be sort of like a DevOps thing where they came to you and they're like, okay, we have this. Can you please, from this, can you please get us this data? In reality, you would, the program that we're going to write, you would give back to them and say, here, these are the numbers for you. Would you like me to write an application for you in the future so you never need to come back to me, right? Because that's where the value is. The value is in creating useful tools for other people to use as developers. Okay, so let's run down this task really quick. Um, all day for each transaction, the name of the customer, okay, the amount spent, the type, okay, and they also have the date. Your task is to use your Python skills to iterate through this string and clean up each transaction and store all the information in easier to access lists. So essentially what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to get all the names in their own list, all the sales in their own list, and all of the types in their own list. And, okay, we're going to have to get each transaction in its own list by itself. So we really have two things that we need to do. One, we need to get a list, okay, within a list, and the internal list here needs to be these transactions, okay, and the external list needs to be a list of all the transactions. Then for each thing, so for each customer, we need to create a list. For each, we'll call this sale, right? Each sale will have to create a list. So we're gonna have to organize the data. Okay, so let's get started here. Um, so first, take a minute to inspect the code. How is each transaction stored? Each transaction is stored by using, again, we use the semicolon, colon, semicolon delimiter to separate the data. And then to separate each transaction, we're using a comma. So easy peasy. It looks like each transaction is separated by a comma. Yep. So if we want to split up daily sales, and let me get some space here. If we want to split up daily sales into a list of transactions, we're going to want to split by the comma. But first, we need to replace the semicolon, comma, semicolon delimiter with something without a comma, so we don't split any transactions themselves. Okay, so we're going to take this variable, daily sales replaced, which is going to be our new variable, and we're going to stick in all of the sales, or that huge list, into it. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to replace, okay, all of the semicolon, comma, semicolons, and what we're going to replace them with is we're just going to use a plus symbol. Okay, and now we can split the string into a list of individual transactions. So they want us to split what we just created and create a new variable called transactions, and we're going to take this replaced variable that we just created, and we're going to split this, and we're going to split it on the comma, because remember the comma, the comma is each transaction. So we're going to create a list of transactions. So if we print this out and take a look at it, and here I'll put our print statements or our tests. Okay, and we print this, you'll see that we get, this is the Python list symbol. So now we have a list. The string is now a list. And you can see that each object in the list is now being separated by this plus symbol, which is our delimiter that we replaced here. Now it's still not great because everything is separated by a comma, but we need to make each thing separated by a comma its own list, if that makes sense. So we're gonna have to split everything inside of this list. Okay, we're gonna have to split it on this little plus symbol to get each one of these as an individual list item of a list. Okay, so we went ahead and split that, and our test worked. So we're going to comment that out. We printed that out. Our next step is to split each individual transaction into a list of data points. Ooh. First, let's define an empty list. Okay. Empty list called daily transaction split. Okay. Now iterate through daily transactions. Remember, this is a list of strings currently. So yes, if you look, these are strings. It's a list, a huge list of strings. Okay, so we're gonna write a loop, and we're gonna say for each transaction, okay, that's in our daily transactions. Remember, daily transactions is located right here. Okay, we're gonna take the daily transactions, plural, okay, and we're gonna split them. Now this is what it's, one thing that's interesting about string methods that we didn't discuss is that you can chain them, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna, I don't know if we can do this. I don't think we're gonna split here. I think what we're gonna do is we're for each daily transactions, we can append each transaction, and we can split each of those transactions on the plus symbol. And this is what I mean by chaining, right? We did a dot append, and we're appending each transaction here, which each transaction is this, okay? And then we're saying, okay, for each of those transactions inside of here, we're going to split that on the plus symbol. So let's just look at one transaction here. Myrtle Morris /n plus. So it'll be split here. So this will be, it'll create a new list, And in that new list, the first item will be Myrtle Morris. The second item in that new list will be 22.6. The third things will be green, blue, and white. And the fourth thing will be the date. Okay, so this creates our list within a list. Okay, and if we want to prove that, all we do is we come down here and we print, right? Remember, we print our daily transactions. Did I spell that right? Transactions. Let's save this. Oh, we have an error. Append list object has no attribute split. Huh. We have an error. So daily transactions. You know what? For each, we're going to take daily transactions and we're going to append each transaction split on. That's correct. Daily transactions underscore split. So saying that the daily transactions append transaction split, it can't work because list object can't be split. So each transaction is coming in as a split. I wonder if, so what we'll do here is we'll comment this out and we'll bring back our previous print statement, which won't work. Expected indent block. So if we take a look at this, it is a list item. We do have to split this. No, that looks right. So for each transaction in daily transactions, we're going to append each transaction. So we're adding to daily transactions. Ooh. Underscore split. Should probably do that because that's the name of the list that we're trying to append to. So that was probably the error. It was the error. So what happened was I didn't actually append it to the split. I tried to append it back to transactions, which was wrong. But that happens, and that's why you need to just take a look at it real quick, and it'll get better with practice. All right. All right. So, cool. Now iterate through daily transactions, which we did. And for each transaction, split the string around whatever character you replaced, which is this. We're splitting it on the plus symbol. And append each of those to daily transaction split, which we did. Cool. So now, remember when I said we were getting a list instead of a list? If you look, we now have an open and closed bracket wrapped around each of the transactions. Or where each of those original commas were that separated out each transaction, we essentially just created that into a list. So it looks like each data item has inconsistent white space. So let's define an empty list called transaction clean. Okay, and it's going to be equal to an empty list. And now we're going to have to iterate through it for each transaction again. In daily transaction split. Remember how I said, in the last module, we create an empty list and then we loop over the old list and we do something to that old list and we store it into the new list. Well, if you look at what they want right here, for each transaction, iterate through the different data points and strip off any white space. Add each of these cleanup transactions to the new list transaction clean. Iterate through split for each transaction. Okay, so for each is a loop, right? For each is a loop. Transaction iterate is another loop. So just based on the use of these words here, for each transaction, which is, so for each anything, so it's going to be for each followed by a noun. Okay, that's one loop. And then they tell us for each of those things, iterate. So this is going to be for sure 2 loops, right? It has to be 2 loops. And we'll say for each data point in transaction. Spell that right? Yeah. So we're looping through our what we split, our daily transaction split, and then we're going to loop through each of those transactions one by one. Now, remember what I said, right? The technique here is that we always create an empty list. So we're going to create another empty list, and we're going to say this is transaction with no S, clean, and this is going to equal to an empty list. So here's an empty list, and transactions, plural, and another empty list with transaction clean. So I have 2 empty lists, one outside of the loop and one outside of the internal loop. So again, very, very common technique to use. And we're going to use it twice here because why change anything? We know how this works, right? We're going to do something on the first loop. We're going to say we're going to take transaction clean, which is this list, right? Assuming I can spell transaction clean, make sure it's spelled correctly. Okay, and what we want to do is we want to append. Okay, so we're going to add, okay, to that list each data point. Okay, now if we look at each data point, we need to clean the data points. We know 2 things about each of these data points. So the data points are these individual things inside of here that are separated by commas. So each of these are data points. So we're taking a list of lists, which is our first for loop, and we can say this is the big list. And then we can say this is a small list of individual sales, right? So our big list, denoted by these 2 brackets, right? The outer bracket meaning everything in this list, and the smaller bracket meaning everything in this one tiny list. Okay, so for each data point, which remember, we're looping through this data point, or I'm sorry, we're looping through this list, and then for each thing on this list, we're saying that everything separated by a comma is a data point. Okay, so for each data point, I want to replace anything that's a /n or a new line, okay, with an empty space. So I'm going to convert all my /n's to just empty white space. That's the first thing we're going to do, right? So if I were to test this out, and I don't believe I added anything to this. I think I only added stuff to this. So this print statement actually should be inside of here. Actually, it should be 1, 2. It should be here. Print transaction singular clean, and we save this. Daily transaction split is not defined for transaction. Daily transaction split is not defined. It is defined. Transactions split, save. Okay, so I'm printing this from inside this loop. Notice how there's no dash or /n's anymore? They were all replaced by an empty space. Okay, so our first step of cleaning this is good, right? We've cleaned some of this. Okay, let's see. I'm trying to get this in a way to where this just doesn't look all crazy. Let's do this. Let's move this. And then I think this, we can do this. Yeah. Okay. So you can see that we've removed all the dash ends. Well, here's, again, methods are behaviors that are dealt on a string. So what that means is we can chain methods together, okay? So instead of having to write another thing where I say transaction clean dot append like we were doing before, okay, what we can do is we can say, okay, for each data point, I'm going to replace all the slash n's with white spaces, and then I'm also going to strip all the white spaces. And I'm just going to get rid of them. And then I'm going to save this, and you can see all the white spaces are gone. Isn't that cool? So one thing that we were doing wrong in our exercises were we could have just chained together methods, because remember, a method belongs to a class. This class is called string. All methods can be applied to that string as long as it's still a string. So we could just dot things back to back. We can make methods work together. Okay? So now that we have cleaned, okay, we have cleaned transaction clean, this guy. What we want to do is we want to go to transactions with an S, okay, which is our guy up here. And we want to put into it each transaction that we've cleaned. Singular. Clean. Cool. So each thing that we cleaned gets stored, because remember, it's a loop inside of a loop. So it only stores one list, miniature list at a time gets stored in here. When this loop goes around again, it gets rid of this thing in the list, and then it moves on to this next one and cleans it. So it's a really neat sort of, dare I say, function that if you're making this an application, you're going to want to functionize this piece right here. This is going to, you're going to want to function. Okay, but again, like I said before, this is sort of like a one-off. Somebody came to you and they said, we need this done. Okay, so now we're going to create 3 empty lists called customers, sales, and threads sold. Easy enough. So customers, sales, and threads sold. And these are going to be empty lists. And if we were on Visual Studio Code, we could just multi-line this and create this real quick. Okay. All right, so we're going to collect individual data points. So let's go ahead and mark that complete. Okay, so now we're going to iterate through transactions clean. For each transaction, we're going to append customer's name to customer, sales to sales, and threads sold to threads sold. Okay, so we know a couple of things. We know just by looking at this data that the first position is always the name, the second position is always the sales, and the third position is always going to be green, or the thing, the color, right? The color that we're selling, apparently. Okay, so we're going to iterate through transactions clean. Remember, transactions clean is this list over here. That looks a lot better than when we started, right? And what we're going to do is we know that customers, we need to add each transaction at the first index, right? And the first index will always be the first name. Always. If you look at the beginning of every single list, it is the first name. I think we got Kevin calling us. Let me check. Who's calling me? No? I don't know. I got somebody calling me. I don't know. Anyways, we'll go ahead and ignore that. And I'm going to copy and paste each one of these. And instead of index 0, I'm going to change this to 1 and 2. And then instead of customers, I'm going to put sales and threads sold. So sales and then threads sold. Thread sold. Okay. And so if you look, thread sold would be these colors here. Now, if you look, the data's not great. Like, there's further stuff we're going to have to do. Like, first of all, it has the $ symbol on it, which is great, except it probably shouldn't be there, right? We should probably get rid of that. But let's look ahead. Print customer sales and threads sold to make sure you get what you expect to see. Fair enough. So let's print customers, and I'm not going to print all three. I'm just going to print customers, and you can see that we get our customers and a nice, awesome list. Man, that's a lot of transactions. That's a lot of customers. Did I do that right? For each transaction in transactions clean. Yeah, let's look at sales. Let's see if there's any repeatable data here. Now, what's interesting is 2266 is printed. So it seems like we're having a bunch of repeated data here. And I don't think that 121, I think that's wrong. So if we look, let's look at our raw data. First transaction is 121, but not all 4 of them are 121. So that's actually incorrect. So something with our loop went awry because there's a lot of repeated data down here, which is not great. Because we know that this should not look uniform the way that it does, where each of these rows is 1570. If you look, 1570, it always repeats 4 times. So what that means is that what happened was, I bet you, because this is inside of this loop, I bet you what happened was, because of the formatting on Codecademy, and what I mean by that, yep, I bet you it's supposed to look like that. I think it's just the formatting. The formatting I may have jacked up. So let's save this and let's look. That looks better. There's no uniform, no 4 of the same prices. So what happened was, inside of the for loop, the formatting was jacked up just because of our limitation of the IDE here. And also because I have it zoomed in. If I had it zoomed out, right, it would look a little bit different. But anyways, I have it zoomed in, so that's how it's going to look. And let's go back. So print sales looks good. Okay. So print customer, yep. So determine the total value of the days in sale. So it says, now we want to know how much threads shed made in a day. Define a variable called total sales equal, and set it equal to 0. So you already know what we're going to do. Now consider the list sales. So sales has all the numbers that we made. Okay. We need to add them. We need to remove the $, and we need to set them equal to floats. So for the first thing, we already know we're going to have to create a loop, right? For each of the sales, for each sale inside of sales, we know we're going to have to take the total sales, and we're going to add to it plus equal, right? Which is append. Okay. We're going to convert whatever we're doing into a float. Now, before we can, it's going to be a string. But in order to convert each of these strings into floats, we need to get rid of the $. And the way to get rid of the $, is to take each sale, okay, and strip it. Nice and easy. We're just going to strip it on the $, and we're done. And then what it's going to do is it's going to give us total sales. And we can test this by printing out our total sales. and save this. And so that's our total sales. So we made about $1,500 based on that sales transaction log. So there's a lot going on inside this little for loop, right? We're appending two total sales, each sale stripped of the dollar sign. Okay? And then we're adding it on to the next value. So for each sale it sees, it's going to add it like an operator. The reason we did not append it, okay, and we used the plus equal is because the plus equal is a math operator that allows you to add things to each other mathematically as an operation. Okay, so let's move this test. And so we know that works. So we're going to comment that out. So that wasn't bad. Print total sales, 1,500. How much that of any specific color was sold? So finally, we want to determine how many of each color of thread we sold today. Let's start with a single color and we'll generalize it. First, print out thread sold and inspect it. So let's inspect. And okay, so we have a bunch of colors, and like I said, remember we had that ampersand? We're gonna have to get rid of that ampersand. It's just it's gotta go. Like it's gonna have to go. We see that thread sold is a list of strings. Some strings are colors, and some strings are multiple colors separated by the ampersand. The end product here is we want a list that only contains the color sold, not the strings that have multiple colors in them. So again, let's create an empty list. Nothing shocking here, right? And after we create a list, what do? We loop every time. We know. We create an empty list, we loop. It's a technique that's being drilled into our brains. So we're going to iterate over each thread sold, right? And let's comment that out. And for each item, check if it's a single color or a multiple colors. If it's a single color, append that color to thread. So if it comes up as just green, just toss it into the list. We don't care about it. If it comes up as green and purple, we're going to need to split it and then add each component back into the list. Okay, so this is a list within a list again. So okay. Okay, let's walk through this, right? So for each of our sale in thread sold, okay, and then for each color, so this is thread sold, and then for each color, meaning each color, yeah, for each color in sale, okay. Now I understand that this is gonna come across as one color. Sale is gonna, or each, that's gonna come across as a color, right? But what did I say about methods? Methods can be used at any time you have a string. We are going to split each sale by an ampersand. And what this does is this makes sure we don't have to create another loop because we're just going to split it at this loop level. So I know that sounds complicated, but it's really not. If you think about it, each one of these is sale. So each one, so green is a sale. And then it says for each color in sale, the only color is green. It's a list of one. So it'll never really hit this loop statement. It'll hit it, but it'll pick back up green. Okay? But if white and blue hit this loop statement, color is white and blue, and we're splitting sale by the ampersand, it creates like a mini loop of two things. It'll loop over twice. It'll say for each color in sale dot split at the ampersand. So for each would be for white and blue. So for white, do something, and then loop back up to me, and then for blue, do something. because it's being split at the ampersand. Okay, so if we follow that logic, okay, then what we can do is we can take thread sold split, which at this point is empty, and we can append color. And when we append color, let's take yellow here. Yellow comes into this loop as sail. It gets passed down here, yellow. It says for each thing in yellow, which is just yellow. So it literally looks, and it says for each yellow in yellow, right? And there's only one yellow. It appends that yellow to thread sold split. Now let's look at green and yellow. Green and yellow come in as sail. Okay? Then it gets split up into green by itself and yellow by itself. And then it says, for each thing that you found after you split sail, add it back to thread sold split. So it'll take green by itself and turn it into color. Green now becomes color. Okay, and gets appended to this list. And then yellow becomes its own color, gets here and gets added. And that green, yellow, and black would be the same thing. It would split up green, yellow, and black into a miniature list of 3 items, green, comma, yellow, comma, black, and then it will run this for loop on it. If it only comes in as green, it'll hit this loop and it'll loop over once. And that one time that it loops over will be green. So I know that's a little bit confusing, but if you need extra time to stop and play around with it and look at it, then definitely mess around with it. Try printing out sail here, right? And then if you print out sail, you'll see, I don't know if it's long enough. Maybe it is. White, white, green, green, green. Let's get rid of print sail. So this is just printing out whatever sail is. And if sail is green, then it appends to this list. And we know that because what we can do is we can print out split. And then we can take all of this, cut this, put it below, and then run this. And you can see that when we actually print out the actual list, the list will show you all the colors it extracted, which again is pretty cool. Okay, moving on. So we did that. Okay, it says great. Now we have a list of threads sold split that contains an entry with every color of every thread that we sold today. Define a function called color count. Okay, so def color count is going to take one argument color. Okay, and the function should iterate through thread sold split and count the number of times the item is equal to the argument color. It should then return the count. So essentially, okay, so we're creating a function that we're going to put in a color, and it's going to tell us how many times that color appears on our list. So we've done this before. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a counter called color total. Set it equal to 0. Then what do you think we're going to do? We're going to iterate over, okay, each thread color in thread sold split. Okay. So we put in a color, and now we're going to iterate over this list here. So we're not taking this list as an argument because this list already exists. It's considered a global variable. We have access to it anytime we want to. So we're going to look for each of those colors inside of the list. And we're going to say, you know what, if color, which is our input to our function, is equal to the thread color, which is each color inside of this list, okay, then what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the color total, and we're just gonna add equals 1 to it. Okay. Then we're gonna go outside the for loop, and we're just gonna return back our color total. So this counter will go up. So if we put in red, it'll go through red, it'll go through this list and find all the reds. When it finds a red, it'll add 1 to color total. It'll keep going until the end of the list, and by the time it gets to the end of the list, we can see how many reds. So the way to test this is to print the function, or to print color out, I don't know, red, and print this color total. Oh, I need to type, I need to spell, I need to practice. And I think we may have had, yes, we had an interference. 24. So there's 24 reds. Okay? But what we should do is we should really create a list of all the colors and run them through as a loop. And here's what I'm saying. So if we go back and we look at that list again, we know that we have colors, okay? And let's see. Before we do that, let's see what they want. Test your function with white. Test it with red, whatever. Define a list called colors. It stores all of the colors the thread offers. So they gave us the list here. Cool. This is what we were going to do anyways. So we were going to do this list anyways. Colors, space, equals, space. And again, this is just the formatting is a little bit messed up because the IDE window is a bit smaller. Okay, so let's click this. Okay, now using the list colors, the string method format, and the function color count, iterate through thread sold split and print a sentence that says how many threads of each color were sold today. Okay, so because we made the function, they want us to iterate over thread sold split, but look, we already did. So we're just going to create a loop, okay, that says for color, okay, and colors, right? So we have a list of the colors. Super simple. We're listing for each color, okay, we're going to print, okay, and I'm going to format this a little bit different. We're going to print thread shed sold, and I'm just going to put an index. I'm going to say index 0, okay, threads of index 1 thread today, okay, and then I'm going to run dot format and get this. That function that we created up here, I'm going to put in the color count, and I'm going to pass it the color. So it's going to iterate over the colors, and then it's going to take a single color, red, and it's going to pass it into this function. And whatever that function kicks out is then going to take the place, okay, of the first index. So that's cool. That's useful. And then finally, I'm going to pass it just color by itself. So we sold X amount of threads of, we sold X threads of Y color today. Okay, so let's make sure none of our tests are highlighted here. Okay, so let's do that. And let's run this. Oh no, so color count is not defined. So what did I do wrong? Color out. Color out. Oh, you just name it color count. Pretty simple. Woo! Look at that. Okay, so Threadshed sold 24 threads of red today. Sold 34 threads of yellow. 30. What we care about is where's the white one at, because that's the 28 that was in our use case here before. So now we can iterate through and we can get each of the colors, okay? And how many of them we sold today, assuming the date is the same. But we know the date's the same because this chunk is taken from the same date. This is all taken from 9/15/17. Make sure all these are highlighted so we can complete this. 6. Yes, and save. Okay, so make sure you grab all the code here. And then in Visual Studio, create a new program called thread_shed.py and make sure you paste all the work we just did here and save that. Okay, so we created a program that will go through a list of gnarly looking information, turn it into a list of nice looking information, and then look, we were able to get valuable data. We were able to get how much money we made. We were able to get how much of each thread that we sold. So we know when we go to purchase new thread, which colors we probably need to buy more of. We probably need to buy more yellow because we sold the most thread we sold was yellow, right? This is useful information. So if you manage to stay with me on this, well done. I know it's getting complicated. I know it's getting hard. Watch it a couple of times. It's not easy. If it were easy, then everyone would be programmers, right? Okay, let's take a look at what's up next. So we have a quiz. We'll do the quiz on the same video. Let's just go through, we'll do that on the next video, actually. All right, so we will see you next time with the quiz.